Okay, so now we have a nicely exposed image. We've got the highlights and the shadows kind of evened out. We're not clipping too much on either side of things. We're in good shape. So now we want to look at the colors of the image. And again, your first step there is to select your basic color profile. I like Adobe Color, so we're good to go on that. Now we're going to look at the overall colors of our image. So the first thing we'll look at is what did it do with that initial auto setting. It brought the vibrance up on the image. So that's sort of how kind of dramatic the colors are going to look, for lack of a better word. You can see if I move it all the way up, it becomes really unnatural. The greens look kind of alien green. The purples look kind of purplish bluish. It looks really weird and not good. If I bring it all the way down, it becomes really kind of boring and not colorful. So again, bringing the vibrance up a little bit is usually a good idea. I like to bring some of that extra sort of colorfulness into the food photos, especially with something like these beautiful greens in this salad, without it looking unnatural. And the number one rule with food photos: make the food look good. It's very important. So if we do this, this doesn't look good, nor does that. I'm going to bring the vibrance up a little bit. I'm going to bring it up maybe a little bit more than Lightroom decided to do naturally. Now, saturation is sort of how intense those colors are. And you can see there's a bit more leeway here. I could bring saturation all the way up. Still looks a little bit unnatural, but it's not as weird as vibrance being all the way up. If I bring it all the way down, totally desaturated, we end up with a monochrome image. So again, I tend to bring this a little bit, make it a little bit more flat. I'm going to bring it up just a bit. And as I mentioned before, how much you make adjustments here depends a lot on whether you are doing editorial photos or you're doing something that's more sort of free-form and creative. So if you're posting this on your own social media, for example, your blog, you can probably, get more creative, decide you want really, vibrant, saturated images. Wow, the colors really pop, that's pretty intense. If you're shooting for an editorial context, like a magazine or newspaper, you want to be subtle with edits here, or maybe not even make edits with vibrance and saturation, and just make your color changes with some of the other things we'll talk about. Because you can quickly, as you can see, kind of exaggerate the colors of an image in a way that could be seen as untruthful in a journalism context. So just consider your audience. I think tweaking the vibrance a little bit, as long as you're still keeping the image consistent with what you saw when you were out there photographing, then you're good there. So tweak vibrance a bit. I'm going to bring saturation up just a little bit to get a little bit more intensity to those colors, and I feel good now about this. The next thing we want to look at is the white balance of the shot. So you can see when this comes in, the white balance is going to be set to as shot. That's basically how my camera interpreted the white balance in the scene. Now I can switch over to auto. In this case, it's going to be fairly similar, so I don't see a big difference. I can also change to daylight. If this was shot outside, you can see it's going to really bring up the yellows. It looks totally weird in this case. Tungsten, I can experiment with basically the different types of lighting that might have been present with this image. In this case, the auto setting looks good. Almost always that's going to be the best setting to go for. And this is helpful because there might be a color cast to the light that you were shooting in, especially if you're shooting at a restaurant where you weren't controlling the light. You can get kind of yellow colors, you can get greenish colors. In this case, it was natural light coming in a window, so it's gonna look pretty good. It's gonna be pretty balanced, and the as shot and auto are gonna do a pretty good job of handling white balance here. If you have a really weird color cast, then one thing you can do is to actually use this white balance selector. And I can actually select a neutral point in the image. And I like to use the white plate to select that. And that's going to say basically, okay, this thing under my dropper here is neutral white. And it's going to change the white balance in the rest of the image based on that. So you want to find a fairly bright highlight. You can experiment. And again, because it isn't a color cast, what we're getting is we're sort of introducing one. But if you end up with an image where, there was some weird light color in the restaurant where you shot it, it looks totally, yellow and unusable, try using this setting, click on a white place of the image, and you, again, can end up with something that's still really pleasing. It can get rid of that color cast completely, which is awesome. In this case, we're going to go with the auto white balance. You can see we get a pretty nice look here. Now, one final thing that you can do, this is a kind of a neat feature that's somewhat unique, I would say, to Lightroom, is you can go in and you can make some of these changes to, sharpness. You can make changes to the tone curve, and you can do things that are going to be a little bit, more sort of intense changes on here. So one thing I can do here is I can go into tone curve, for example, and I can start to play with the very, very specifics of my histogram here. So if I want to bring up, the deeper shadows a bit, I can start to do that. The danger here when you're starting to make these kinds of very specific edits is that you can end up, with something that looks a little bit flat or really blown out if you go overboard on it. So certainly you can go into these more detailed settings, but I like to stick to generally the settings that you see here when I'm working with color, instead of getting into those very specific channel by channel edits or curves there. And I feel good about this now. I think this is a good image where I've got some nice rich colors that still look natural. I've got these reds that are quite vibrant popping out. The white plate looks white, and we're in good shape here.